Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Headline. British Prime Minister Liz Truss has resigned as the Conservative Party leader, saying she can no longer deliver the mandate she was elected on last month, ending her tenure at 10 Downing Street following an open revolt against her leadership. The 47-year-old will stay in charge until his successor is elected by the governing Tory party, with a leadership election to be completed by next week. Now, there are also reports that ousted Premier Boris Johnson is considering to run for the post again. Other top contenders include Rishi Sunak, Suella Braverman, who quit as the Home Secretary just yesterday, and the UK Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. Now, before we go ahead, we'll also play out in a bit what Liz Truss said today when she announced her resignation. But meanwhile, let me go across to Achal Malhotra, former Indian ambassador, who's joining us on the show. I'm also speaking with Lord Meghnad Desai, author and British Economist. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Ambassador Malhotra, let me begin with your take. Was it expected that Liz Truss would go, and do you really think Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson now have a chance?
Well, first thing first, I think Liz Truss probably was not the right choice as far as the elected parliamentarians are concerned. But somehow she had a support at the grassroots levels. There's some echo in the voice. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly, sir.
Okay. So, but as we all know that she became the Prime Minister, the leader of the party, because she had a support in the grassroots levels. No point in going into the reasons. Was it because Rishi Sunak was not the so-called pure British or pure English, or whether it had anything to do with his origin? But you know, the larger point is the UK is facing a sort of a political crisis of one type or the other, and economic crisis for some time now. And when she was elected, she really didn't have any viable solutions for the country to come out of the economic crisis, which again is for multiple reasons. Partly it is because of the fallout of the Russia-Ukraine war, and partly for other mismanagement of the economy. The kind of suggestions she made about tax cuts and other things made her unpopular. Then she was also having problems with her own
Ambassador
cabinet
Malhotra,
colleagues.
if I may, she was elected or chosen because of the tax cuts she actually delivered. She's one of those politicians who delivered what she promised, and that seems to have sunk her. No,
she was elected by her own party colleagues, not by the people of the UK.
I know, but her position, which put her ahead of Rishi Sunak, were these very tax cuts, which she actually came and did.
Not necessarily. The parliamentarian colleagues, the elected members of the Conservative, were clearly in favor of Rishi Sunak and the policies he was propagating for getting the country out of the economic crisis. It was in the larger context, when you go to the grassroots, other factors seem to have come to play. Boris Johnson played an important role because he thought he was stabbed in the back, and he made every possible effort to make sure that Rishi Sunak is not elected. And now she is admitting that she failed to deliver on what she had promised. Basically, the promise was, at the end of the day, the promise was to get the country out of the economic crisis, a very difficult job.
Yeah.
So now the country is back to the same position, the political crisis and also economic crisis.
Right. The economic crisis has not disappeared with her resignation. But let me just play out for you. Let me just play out for our viewers what exactly she said when she resigned.
Families and businesses were worried about how to pay their bills. Putin's illegal war in Ukraine threatens the security of our whole continent. And our country has been held back for too long by low economic growth. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party.
We go across now to Lord Meghnad Desai, who's also joining us on the show. Sir, you were among the few people who came actually on the show and said Liz Truss must go. She's resigned today. Do you think this is the first step towards fixing the problem?
Well, I was not in favor of either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, but I thought that Liz Truss had more experience than Rishi because he is still only a fresher parliamentarian almost. No, I think basically she made a mistake of going too far too soon with a policy. I had said in print in London that if she plans to do what she intends to do, the pound will collapse. And the pound has collapsed, and now I think we need a change. And I believe, like what your previous interlocutor was saying, I think the Conservative Party will decide to cut the cackle and just basically go for Jeremy Hunt, because right now they need time to restore the reputation. They need a mature politician. And Jeremy Hunt, who has been around, who has been a health secretary, who has had another cabinet position, and has twice tried to be leader and come second, I think he will be a very good pair of hands. And luckily, he's already shown that the markets are happy with him being at the top. So he will not continue to be the Chancellor. Maybe Rishi will come back as a Chancellor, and that's quite possible because they're friends. But I think what will happen is that Jeremy Hunt would most probably become the new Prime Minister. I think this whole episode has brought the country into great disgrace. Everybody's laughing, including inside the country. And I think the Conservative Party will have to try very hard to regain their reputation.
So Jeremy Hunt, of course, has said now that he's out of the race. Boris Johnson saying he might come in. But I want to just ask you about Liz Truss and the act of resignation and the point that the ambassador was making. Just the resignation is not solving all the problems, isn't it? The big question mark is on that party election next week. Lord Desai.
No, you see, we have a problem here, which people haven't realized. Legally, we cannot have an election till 2024. There is something called Fixed Term Parliament Act, which was passed during the coalition government 2010-2015. But the Liberal Democrats, who are partner in the coalition, insisted that election must be held every 5 years and not in between, because they were afraid that the Conservatives may ditch them halfway through the first coalition. So they passed that, and we have every desire to reverse that, but right now that act stands. So even if they wanted to have an election, there's no way they can have an election right now. So the best thing to have another prime minister who will take the party to the election deadline, as it were. So right now it is not open to the prime minister, whoever it is, to call an election. That freedom has been taken away constitutionally.
So of course, there is a lot that needs to unfold. Ambassador Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, are they all truly contenders now? Do you think so?
I don't know how Boris Johnson, who had been disgraced, and how can he expect to be getting back to to the prime ministership? That this would be again a mockery of the whole, the party's reputation question. I mean, you send somebody out, he resigns for XYZ reasons, and because there was a revolt against him by his own colleagues. What face does he have? I mean, it doesn't appeal to reason. Rishi Sunak was the choice of many elected parliament. And I really don't know, will they again go through the same process? Like first there will be a election by the parliamentarians and then by the Conservative Party members. Or maybe Lord can explain a little bit more on that point. But I think, personally, I think Boris Johnson should have, I mean, there's no reason for him to feel that he can stage a comeback. Rishi Sunak, yes, he stands a chance, but he's an economist. The country needs a trade economist who can get the country out of the economic crisis, because that's the top priority at this point of time.
He also has the ability to say, "I told you so."
Yes, and also he has the support, at least amongst the colleagues.
I mean, he called it. He called it. He said that if Liz Truss does this, then it's going to turn into a nightmare, and that's what happened. So he has the ability to say, "I told you so." So we'll see how that goes. We have to also remember Rishi Sunak didn't make the cut also because he was seen as elitist and seen as rich, and a country where people are suffering. You know, I saw a report today. People are skipping meals because of how bad the economy is. So that may not be going in his favor. Anyway, it's a very interesting story to watch. I'm absolutely out of time. I want to thank you, Ambassador Malhotra. I want to thank you, of course, Mr. Desai, for joining us on this show. And I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us this evening on Beyond the Headline. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. We'll see you then.